Hello, everybody. I'm Howie Hawkins. I was the Green Party candidate for president and the Socialist Party candidate for president in 2020. And this podcast called Green Socialist Notes is about continuing to educate and advocate for the eco-socialist program that we ran on in 2020. So today, I don't have a guest. I just want to get your thoughts and your questions about what the hell is going on with Trump now in office for a couple months. I mean, he's quickly consolidating a fascist takeover of the federal government. It's got so bad that countries like Britain, Canada, Denmark, Finland, and Germany have issued travel warnings coming to the US because of arbitrary detentions of legal immigrants and tourists with legal visas from those countries, because they're being detained for anything from the people checking them when they come in for having anti-Trump messages on their phones, to simply being foreigners. I mean, there are a couple Germans tried to come in through the southern border, and they've been in detention now for a few weeks. It's so these countries are saying, we're as unsafe to travel to as a place like Somalia. So that's how bad it's getting. Trump is defying court orders, which puts us in a constitutional crisis. And then, in the background, the climate crisis, we got the news this week that global mean temperatures for the past 10 years, for each of the past 10 years, 2015 to 2024, were individually the 10 warmest years on record. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is at a 2 million year high. You go back 2 million years, sea levels were 40 meters higher than they are today. And Trump, of course, is canceling all the federal programs to research and mitigate climate change. And he's promoting fossil fuels, including coal, which, of course, is going to accelerate climate change. So, this guy is just trying to destroy the planet. And he's also trying to destroy the economy. I mean, between all this tariff talk, starting trade wars with everybody, and radically cutting back on federal spending illegally, and that's what a lot of these court orders are about, which is going to reduce domestic demand. The stock market's gone down 10% already. People are feeling poorer. Prices have not come down. Tariffs are going to make them go higher. I mean, we had a strong economy, and this guy is going to put it in the tank. And then there are these attacks on education. He wants to shut down the Department of Education, but because he can't do that, he's basically holding back the funding, except for loans that students have qualified for. But most federal funding for public education are programs to help disadvantaged schools and students. And it's about 10% of all education funding, which is mostly state and local, but this is targeted at the most disadvantaged people. It is just cruel. That's all you can say about it. And then the attacks on higher education is an attack on free speech and academic freedom. And the response of some of these universities is despicable. Columbia University totally caved into Trump's demands to put the Middle East Studies Department in receivership and expel pro-Palestinian demonstrators exercising their First Amendment rights. They fired Catherine Frank, a 25-year tenured law professor, for criticizing students at Columbia who are former IDF soldiers who sprayed pro-Palestinian students with irritants. And for condemning a violent act, she's been basically fired. You've all heard of Mahmoud Khalil, who is he's completed his degree requirements, and Columbia University has been complicit in having ICE detain him on the way to exportation or deportation, despite court orders saying stop it. And Khalil asked for protection from Columbia University because Zionist extremists had doxed him and were threatening him. And Columbia didn't help him. It's just terrible. I mean, it's caving in to fascism by these elitists at Columbia University. The administration there we should give it nothing but contempt. Another Columbia student, a PhD student, Ranjani Srinivasan, she heard that ICE was coming after her, so she hightailed it up to Canada, where she's seeking asylum. Now people are leaving the United States for other countries seeking political asylum. What have we come to? And Columbia is only one of several universities that the Trump administration is targeting. They said, we're going to cut $400 million worth of federal grants to you. They just threatened $175 million worth of grants to the University of Pennsylvania. And they're attacking everywhere. Brown University, a medical professor, a specialist on kidneys, Rasha Alawiya, they're trying to deport her. In fact, no, she can't get back into the country. She went to visit her family in Lebanon, I believe, and they won't let her back into the country. Georgetown University scholar named Badr Khan Suri, they're trying to deport him because they say his wife's father advised Hamas at one point. So, guilt by association, and they're trying to throw this guy out of the country who did nothing. And, it may be happening near where you are, near where I am at Cornell University. A Gambian scholar named Mamadou Tal, who's a doctoral student in Africana Studies, they're trying to deport him. Now, he filed a preemptive lawsuit seeking an injunction against the federal government wanting to deport him. And we'll have a hearing here in Syracuse on Tuesday. But all of this is just the beginning of a fascist jihad against higher education, free speech, and academic freedom. I mean, we are in a terrible place. And then they're even attacking Social Security, the so-called third rail of American politics. They've already ended phone service, forcing seniors, people with disabilities, instead of calling in to deal with your benefits, you got to do an in-person visit. Yet they've cut 12% of the staff, 7,000 workers. So that's going to make it hard to even get in-office service if you can get there. And a judge ruled that DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which is not a department, it's just Elon Musk and his little neo-Nazi, minions, that the judge ruled that they can't get the personal information of people who are getting or applying for Social Security. And Trump's acting director, a man named Leland Dudek, responded by threatening to just shut down the agency, shut down Social Security. I mean, the goal here is to make Social Security so dysfunctional that people will accept Wall Street's plans to privatize Social Security and let beneficiaries invest their Social Security accounts in the stock market where they could lose their money. It takes away a defined benefit and makes it a contingent benefit, contingent on how well you do in the stock market. It is an attack on the American people. And then Trump's billionaire commerce secretary, Howard Lutnick, said yesterday, seniors wouldn't mind if they didn't get their checks for a month. He said only fraudsters would complain. Well, I'm not a fraudster and I'm complaining because I need that Social Security check every month. There are something like 70, 80 million people. They depend on that for their household budgets. And this damn billionaire says we wouldn't care. He don't know what he's talking about. And then you got Trump confidant Larry Fink, who is CEO of the private equity giant BlackRock. Now, he's traditionally been a supporter of Democrats, but since Trump won, he's cozied up and flattered Trump. And he's in there with a proposal to privatize Social Security. So, it's something that I never thought I would see, not even from Trump. But here we are. And the whole public sector is being gutted. They're firing government employees and removing funding from government agencies like the National Institutes for Health, as we're dealing with the potential avian flu epidemic. We got a measles outbreak. We got other potential epidemics in the pipeline, and they're just taking away, basically our warning systems and our research to try to deal with these diseases. They've shut down most U.S. aid programs, which is literally going to kill billions of people. There are already people dying. They haven't been able to get their HIV/AIDS medication from a program that AIDS ran in countries like South Africa, Zimbabwe, South Sudan. I've heard of families dying there because they're not on their antiviral medications. They quickly get sick, tuberculosis, pneumonia. If they don't get them, cancers develop very quickly. And literally, the people run these programs say millions are going to die. It's happening in Ukraine too, where it's one of the highest concentrations of HIV/AIDS in the world. And they have lost, their U.S. aid program. They shut down the Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, which, they're American state media, sure. Although people around the world rely more or find them more reliable in terms of straight news coverage than outfits like RT and Sputnik. But basically, the U.S. is leaving the field open to propaganda programs from Iran, China, and especially Russia. And then with regard to Ukraine, they eliminated a program that was operated out of Yale University that had documented about 30,000 Ukrainian children that had been abducted to Russia. And this data they were collecting could enable the families of those children to track these children down and try to get them back to their families in Ukraine. And not only did they stop the funding, they possibly had the database erased. That's not clear yet. And there's some members of Congress that have written for an explanation. And as far as I know, they haven't gotten it. They're eliminating Justice Department's programs to enforce corporate crime beats, or that are on the corporate crime beats, starting with the program that was to enforce sanctions and anti-corruption laws against Russian oligarchs. The U.S. is withdrawing from the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine, which U.S. Justice Department lawyers were providing expertise and evidence to that outfit. The Consumer Protection Financial Board. They're cutting staffing at the IRS, which is going to cost the federal government billions in revenues because they can't audit these rich folks that, cheat on their taxes, like Donald Trump. So they're creating a kleptocracy where, the super rich can get away with not paying their taxes and committing corporate crime, defrauding us, abusing us, stealing from us. And it's unbelievable. And, we all saw in that reality TV show that Trump set up in the Oval Office to belittle President Zelensky of Ukraine. And what they were running is a minerals and fossil fuels protection racket against Ukraine. It's basically nice country you got there, but you better give us your resources and capitulate to Putin's demands for a ceasefire, or we're going to hurt you by cutting off all aid to Ukraine. And right after that meeting, they did cut off the military and intelligence. And then a week later, because Zelensky sent a flattering letter to Trump, and they had a meeting. They restored the military aid, but that aid is going to run out. That's from what's left of what was authorized under the Biden administration. That's going to run out soon, and there's no move on the part of the U.S. to restore that aid or have a new round of aid. So Ukraine is going to be cut off. This is Trump acted like he was acting in the Godfather movie when he was telling Zelensky he has no cards, he's trying to start World War III, and he's not being nice. And remember in the Godfather says to this guy that wanted a favor, you come to me, but you don't offer friendship. You don't even call me Godfather. I mean, it's like Trump was reciting the lines of that movie. It's oh God, it's just hard to believe that we're seeing this. And we still got idiots on the left posing as anti-imperialists. They're really ultra-imperialists. They support one imperialism over another, Russian, saying there's no difference between the neo-fascist Republicans and the neoliberal Democrats. neoliberal Democrats don't have any solutions, but they're not as bad as these fascist Republicans as we're seeing right now. So I'll just throw out a few more things. The DEI hysteria. I mean, they're eliminating people like Jackie Robinson and the Tuskegee Airmen and the Navajo code breakers from any reference in federal websites at the Pentagon and the military. They're even removing pictures of that iconic flag raising at Iwo Jima because one of those guys, Ira Hayes, was a Navajo. I mean, this is just racist garbage. They're just removing any reference to the military accomplishments of Blacks, Asian Americans, American Indians, and women. It's and then on the other side, he wants a special program to recruit Afrikaner immigrants. Afrikaners were the most racist of the white settlers in South Africa, and some of them still are. They have racist attitudes, like these South African people around Trump, like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and what's the other guy? I forget his name, another tech bro. So they're doing that while they're trying to deport everybody else. What, 500,000 Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, and Cubans, they said yesterday, are going to be deported. There are 240,000 Ukrainians whose status is they didn't renew the program to enable them to have what they call humanitarian parole so they can stay in the country. So in October, they're going to face a loss of status and ICE at their door. And then you look, well, like, who's resisting? Well, it's certainly not the media. You got media moguls who are billionaires who just can't stand up to Trump, like Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post and Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and Patrick Soon-Shiong of LA Times. He's a tech guy, billionaire, and they are all bowing down to the Führer. Der Führer, I guess is how they used to say it. And the mainstream media is normalizing Trump. They like reporting on him like he's a legitimate president, and he may be different than what we had before. I mean, I heard a softball interview by BBC with a Heritage Foundation hack about eliminating the Department of Education with no critical questions or pushback by the reporter doing the interview. And you see that all the time. So, we're in a bad situation. So, what I propose we do today is, talk about, what we're seeing and what we can do about it. And of course, I'll just start by saying what we can do. We can speak up. We can't be silent. We should go out to these street demonstrations. They are proliferating and we need to build them. Even if they're with people that we normally, would be on the opposite sides of when it comes to elections. A lot of these people are progressive Democrats who have attacked us, but, we need a united front with them against this Trump fascism. We can stop cooperation with ICE for sure. We can get our local governments not to take people who are detained, who are undocumented or even documented, but are immigrants and ICE wants without a court-ordered warrant. We can resist the attacks on universities. I don't know who's listening and was in a university, but don't stand for your administration just caving in like Columbia did. We need to look for economic actions. I mean, being in the street and saying no is one thing, but hit them where it hurts. Strikes, boycotts. We need to be looking for that kind of thing. And as I've been saying, for the Greens in particular, or any independent leftists, we got to build local parties while Trump is screwing up the federal government, and get in the position where we can elect thousands of people to local office, create a foundation so we can then challenge for state office and the House of Representatives, and build that up while Trump is in office, and also keep pushing for ranked choice voting to get rid of the spoiler problem and proportional representation. So whatever percentage of the vote we get that percentage of representation in legislative bodies. So we have a multi-party democracy and not what we got now, which is a two corporate party system where the fascist Republican Party is basically trying to even make it a de facto one party system. So That's where we're at. Some of where we're at. I didn't go through the whole list of things we could talk about that Trump's doing, but I hope that can get our conversation started. Yeah, we put in the chat. I said that meeting was a shakedown for not only fossil fuels but oil and gas. And there's an article in the chat from Antonia Juhas that was in Rolling Stone a couple of weeks ago. And there's another one we'll put in the chat, which is from some eco-socialists in Ukraine, Russia, and Central Europe, warning that this would happen. And they warned in August 2022, basically 7 months into there it is in the chat, 7 months into the war, because they were afraid that, fossil capital in particular, but Western capital in general, is going to stop supporting Ukraine because they can do, Russia's a much bigger market. They can make a lot more money in Russia than they can in Ukraine, especially with the war going on. So they warned that capital, and particularly fossil capital, was ready to sell out Ukraine. And it turns out they were right. It took Trump to do it, but that's what they're doing. And while you hear a lot of talk about Russia, building up their defenses and supporting Ukraine, they're having trouble because the European Union is a very loose confederation of states, and each state has its own angle on this problem. And, they may decide, as, we saw, after 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, the Germans were much more interested in doing business with Russia than condemning them for that illegal annexation. And the theory was you do business with Russia and then they'd rather do business than start another war in Ukraine. But that didn't happen. So anyway, I just wanted to call your attention to those two articles. Okay, there are protests around the country tomorrow, Sunday, March 23rd, at post offices called by the National Association of Postal Workers. Yes, go out to those. I've done a lot of work with the postal workers over the years, and they tried to shut down our local branch, which is just about 2 blocks from where I am sitting, and we stopped them. This was like 10 years ago. This was going back to this is pre-Trump. This was during the Obama administration, and so our resistance worked. And so the postal workers unions, there are 4 of them, are very good, and National Association of Postal Workers is one of them. So yeah, look for those and go out and support. It's not just supporting the postal workers, it's supporting your postal service. Because if they privatize that, what the next thing is, the postal service has to deliver everywhere, whether it's profitable or not. It's a public service, and it was written into the Constitution. It's so important, and it still is important. So it's not just supporting the workers, it's supporting your own access to communication, and package delivery without relying on private companies who may just cut you off because they can't make money off you. Joanna Munley, I was very impressed with the veterans protests in Washington, D.C. during the weekend of March 15th. It's great to see U.S. veterans and Capitol Police speaking out in front of our Capitol. Your thoughts? Yeah, there's sort of a default position on the left that, the military and the police are our enemies, but the rank and file, if you're ever going to have a revolution or radical change, you've got to win over the rank and file of the armed forces. And that's why, we should go to things like that. I don't know what the demands of that veterans protest were, but it probably had to do with veterans benefits that Trump is threatening or is already cutting. And, when we have those relationships, it's like during the Vietnam War. What stopped that war were 3 things. One was the resistance of the Vietnamese, of course. The second was the peace movement, putting pressure on the government. But the third was rank and file troops in the American military, particularly the Army, but it led into the Marines. I witnessed that myself. Stop fighting. They stopped, wanting to fight the Vietnamese. They said, this is not our war, it's the wrong war, and we're not going to do it. And Nixon had no choice but to do what he called Vietnamization, which was provide arms to the South Vietnamese military, for a government that was corrupt and run by the landlords that were not popular with the Vietnamese. So that's a case where, it was the relationship of the anti-war movement to the GI movement, the GI anti-war movement, that helped stop that war. And if you study revolutions, it's always the rank and file of the armed forces decide they're not just going to slaughter everybody because they realize they're on the wrong side. So it's important that we build those relationships. I remember Bobby Seale when the Black Panther Party was pushing for community control of the police, and they got a referendum going in Berkeley. And, Bobby Seale's thing was, we want police that serve the people, not pigs that oppress the people. In other words, and he also talked about how the Panthers had friends, particularly Black officers in the Oakland and Berkeley police, that would tip them off to things that the police wanted to do to the Panther Party. So that's another thing. You have those relationships, they will tip you off if you're about to be attacked. So it's really important that we, build those relationships and support, their legitimate demands. I think in this case it was for veterans benefits, but so those are my thoughts on that. That's the kind of thing that a serious left should be doing. Vicky Corden, they want to get rid of Postal Service to get rid of mailing ballots, absentee ballots. I think that's part of it, definitely. But it's bigger than that. They want to get rid of the Postal Service so that they can hand the business over to FedEx and Amazon and UPS and DHL, to private, package delivery companies who are not, like the Postal Service, obligated to provide service everywhere. Vicky Corden, people have paid into Social Security, so it is people's money. Yeah, and it's not like we have individual accounts that are our property. We have there's a pool of money, and we are entitled to a payment based on it. How much we paid in for how long at what wage rates, and also whether you're qualified. I mean, I got Social Security when I was a child because my mother died, so I got a survivor's benefit. People with disabilities, it's not just the old age program, but it's an entitlement. It's not dependent on how much you got in your own individual account. That's what they want to change it to, so they can tell you, okay, here's your money, and you can invest a portion or even all of it, depending on the proposal, in the stock market. Good luck, because you might lose your money. And then what? The thing about Social Security is it's a defined benefit, and you can count on it, or you could count on it until now. Now it's become a question mark. Andrew Hager, just passing through with a rumor about King Charles. From what little I've heard, he may be working to take back America. Take that with a grain of salt. But at this point, yeah, why not? If Trump wants to take Greenland and Canada and Panama and Gaza, why can't King Charles say, well, I'm going to take America? It's crazy talk, but that's where we're at. The problem is Trump is serious. At first I thought he was just, his usual, babbling ignoramus on international relations, which he is, but he's serious. He wants to, he's saying, well, Putin, you can have Ukraine, but let us have Greenland and Canada. It's going back to the 1800s, when imperialism was not just neo-colonial exploitation, it was territorial conquest. Trump actually talked about joining the Commonwealth this week. Oh, God. Um, didn't see that. Uh, I'm a Republican in the small R sense that, kings and queens. I mean, it goes back to the Middle Ages. Let's get past that. Andrew Hayer continued, I think our country might be better off with Charles in charge. Laugh out loud. All jokes aside, what do you think, Howie? Um, we don't want any individual in charge. We want a democracy, and that's what we're fighting for. And the thing the Greens talk about is grassroots democracy, not just electing an elite to represent us in Congress or the city council or whatever it is, but real democracy at the base, like they're doing in Rojava, like they do in the Zapatista communities in Mexico, like we do in town meetings in New England, where everybody gets together and has a direct say in the decisions to be made, whether it's like in town meeting in New England, voting on the budget after debating it, and electing, usually they're called aldermen, which is like a city council, to execute the decisions of town meeting, including the budget. That's the kind, or electing representatives to higher levels of associations. So a city council could represent neighborhood assemblies where the representatives to the city council are not just representatives we elect, but delegates we instruct. So that when the council meets, they are bringing the instructions of their neighborhood assemblies to the council, so that, and then the council should have, or the assemblies should have the right to recall their delegates to the council, so that they're always in the end, in the last analysis, in control of the decisions that are being made on their behalf. And that kind of grassroots democracy is, what the Greens should be advocating. Of course, we advocate a multi-party democracy instituted by, proportional representation and ranked choice voting and ranked choice proportional representation. But we, I've talked about going beyond that, from a representative democracy to a direct democracy and confederation of those assemblies where direct democracy is practiced. And that's what we should be talking about, not whether King Charles is better than Trump. He probably is, but we don't want a benign monarch. We want democracy. Chris Blankenhorn, also giving shelter to the Tate brothers. Yeah. 2, who have pending rape and human trafficking charges in Europe. Pressured the Romanian government to lift their travel ban, got them out, and likely won't extradite if when it comes to trial. Yeah, it's a mafia government, and that's why I think Trump and Putin get along so much. They're the gangsters, and they got a suit and tie on, but they still gangsters, and it's disgusting. Vicky Corden, I also heard that nobody should criticize Tesla because one can be arrested or executed. I hope it is a rumor. I haven't heard executed. I heard Trump called them terrorists, and he said they'd be sentenced to 20 years in El Salvador, which, there's no law that enables him to do that. There are laws against property damage, and, they could be brought to court for that, and that's legitimate. But to say we're going to send you to that god-awful prison in El Salvador, where they sent these alleged Venezuelan gang members, many of which is well documented are not gang members at all. This is just beyond the law. It's, we got the rule of a man now instead of the rule of law, which is, what we fought our revolution for almost 250 years ago. Scout Trooper 164. I wouldn't call it a mafia government. Even mafias help people on occasion. This is just the party from 1984 where you got to 100% follow the line or get destroyed. Yeah, I think a lot about George Orwell's 1984, thinking about today, because I think that's the way Trump and Putin view the world. You know, it's a world where the big powers call the shots, and if you're in a small country, you just got to suffer what they say you got to suffer. So, you know, in 1984, there were three, empires: Oceania, what do they call it? Oceania. One was kind of like, Eurasia. One was Oceania, which was, the Americans. And then the third was the equivalent of the Chinese. I forget what he called that. So if you want to know where we're headed, if we don't make some radical changes, 1984 is a look into the future. East Eurasia. Thank you, Dig Dug. Andrew Hager. Even Republicans are fed up with Trump. Yeah, there are a lot of Republicans because they didn't expect. What was I reading? Some guy working, a veteran, helping veterans with post-traumatic distress syndrome, and he'd had it himself, and he's providing therapy. He voted for Trump, and then he just got fired, and he's of course pissed. It's not what he voted for, but a lot of Trump voters are finding that out, particularly those that benefit from federal programs or actually work for the federal government. This week, even Joe Rogan said, "Why are we fighting with Canada?" Yeah, well, I guess everybody's like a broken clock, right, a couple times a day. Why are we fighting with Canada? There's, because Trump wants to make it the 51st state. He wants to show who's boss. It's all about Trump. And there's no rational reason to start a trade war with Canada, violating the revised NAFTA that Trump negotiated with them in Mexico, his first term, which was it was for show because it didn't really get rid of the, non-transparent resolution dispute courts, which enable corporations to bring grievances against state regulations, government regulations, without labor or the public being, having their own advocates in those hearings. And that didn't change. And that was the big problem with NAFTA. And what do they call it? USMCA. I don't know what that stands for. It sounds like U.S. Marine Corps, but it's not. Anyway, yeah, Trump is violating his own trade agreement. Joanna Munley, do you think the U.S. federal courts can do anything to enforce their rulings on the Trump administration? Well, not in terms of military force. I mean, this goes back to Andrew Jackson telling the court, which ruled against the Indian Removal Act that led to the Trail of Tears and sent the Cherokee and some other Indian nations out to Oklahoma from Georgia. He said, well, let the court enforce its decision. That's basically what Trump is saying now. That's why we have a constitutional crisis. And I'm not a lawyer. There may be mechanisms. The U.S. Marshals work for the federal government, but I believe the court can, get marshals to, deliver subpoenas or bring subpoenaed people to court. I'm not sure about that, but there may be some mechanisms. But that their armed force is nothing compared to the U.S. armed forces. And then the question becomes: are the armed forces going to follow unlawful orders? And they could split on that. And then you've got potential civil war between different factions of the armed forces. I mean, it's hard to predict how all this is going to play out, but it's a very dangerous situation. Dig Dug. Trump has immunity. They'll go after his cabinet and staff. Yeah, but are they going to, like in the first Trump administration, he was telling people in his cabinet and staff not to honor subpoenas from Congress. So who's going to enforce those court orders? You're right. The Supreme Court has given Trump immunity from anything he can claim as an official act, which is, that requires a constitutional amendment. Where the fuck are the Democrats? Who's got that constitutional amendment, at least filed for discussion? If they've done it, I haven't heard about it. I mean, the Democrats are pathetic in this whole thing. Schumer caving in on that continuing resolution, which basically gave Trump, what he wanted in terms of the cuts that are coming to things like Medicaid. He didn't even put up a fight. It's bad. That's why, I said at the top, we got to be in the streets. We got to speak up ourselves, and we got to build an independent political movement. And we're not strong enough to contest federal power now, but we can build local power and make that a foundation for then in the near future going after representation. I'd say representation in the House is where we get leverage. We got a platform. We got votes that the Democrats are going to have to give us something to get something. And, then we can have a real influence on national policy. That is legitimate because our people got elected. That's, I think, where we got to aim for. But as Salvador Allende said, we have to make haste slowly. I think that was the phrase, by which he meant we're in a serious situation. We got to keep moving forward, but we can't get ahead of ourselves. Because in his situation, he faced potential military revolt, which the CIA soon orchestrated under Nixon and Kissinger on the one side. On the other side, the social movements, the workers, the neighborhood assemblies, they were moving it faster than they could get things legislated at the federal level. So, that's what he meant by must make haste slowly. So I'm saying, we got to build the foundation to take on federal power, and we don't have it. So we need to speak up, demonstrate, look for opportunities for economic actions like strikes and boycotts. But on the electoral political side, we've got to build an independent movement. And that means we got to organize, not just mobilize. We got to organize local parties that can win local offices. The Greens have, 170 people in local office. We should have thousands. And we can do that, and it's not just the Greens, it's the whole damn left. I think it's a poor lesson learned from the 60s, where being in the streets, we got gains in civil rights in the Vietnam War. But I think what we had on our side back then was the U.S. couldn't compete in the Cold War as an apartheid country. And so they had to, bring civil rights, or people in the global South would look at the U.S. as, not for them. And then on Vietnam, it was an international problem as well as a domestic problem. And a lot of the elites in the United States, were saying we should cut our losses and get out before we finally did. So we had the ruling class split. And, if we had a strong left, there'd be a part of the ruling class that would say, well, we got to give them something to take the edge off their momentum. And so we could win something like national health insurance, Medicare for all. Most capitalist countries have that. That's not where we should stop. We should not be satisfied with that. Because after the movement settles down and you win it, then the capitalists will start cutting it back, like they have in some of the European welfare states, certainly in Britain, where they had a full socialized system, a national health service. And since Thatcher, it's been underfunded and it's eroded. Still better than what we got, but it's not providing the services it should. So that's why we got to go beyond those things. But how did I get off on this tangent? Yeah, Trump has immunity. I was talking about how we're going to fight Trump, and an amendment to change the Constitution so that the president's not above the law like the Supreme Court says he is or she is. And, that's one thing that's why we need more than the Democrats to fight back against Trump. Vicky Corden, I heard about the implementation of martial law on April 20th, which coincides with Hitler's birthday. Any thoughts? I hope it is a rumor. Plan for the worst, but hope for the best, I guess. Yeah, I've heard that too. I haven't seen any, real evidence of that. I think people are just taking off on the April 20th Hitler birthday, as to say it could happen. But there's, as far as I know, no evidence that it will happen, on that day. Although, Trump himself and people like Michael Flynn, who said we should invoke martial law after the 2020 election and seize the voting machines and basically steal the election using the military. Even Trump couldn't go that far, that fast back then. But he would like an excuse to implement martial law. I think that's a lot of evidence for that, because then he could just disregard a lot of laws, and it's not just him because he's immune, but the people who would implement his instructions. They could martial law would give them the excuse to violate a lot of other laws and repress any opposition. So I don't know if April 20th is a date. I haven't seen direct evidence of that, but the general point is that Trump could invoke martial law. Yeah, he could. And so that, the protest movements need to be smart. We don't want to give him any excuse to do that. I mean, burning the Teslas is probably not big enough for him to do that as much as he'd like. But, there are other things that, a faction of the movement could do, like bombing, destroying property with bombs. That's what Weatherman did. And it really didn't slow down, the war in Vietnam, but it alienated a lot of people from the anti-war movement who thought that's what we supported, which we didn't. So we got to be smart about our tactics and not give any excuses to Trump and his minions to, call martial law and then really crack down on us. Joanna Munley, I wonder when the Trump administration will need Congress to appropriate funds for anything. How can Congress use this to their advantage? Well, right now, the Republicans will do whatever Trump says. I mean, that's clear. Any, never Trump or moderate so-called Republicans are gone. So he's got Congress for this period until the next midterms. This year is when whatever he wants to get through Congress, he can do it. Next year will be harder because those Republicans will be running for re-election, and some of that stuff will be too far for them to go to expect to get re-elected. So, it's this session, but I don't think Trump is thinking he needs Congress. He's thinking he can do it by executive orders and just his control of the, leadership of all the federal agencies. That's where he's doing his damage. And now, one thing I haven't followed this closely, but the impression I get is that the Republicans in Congress, they're willing to give Trump what he wants, even if it means much bigger deficits, which they are normally railing against. So, they're going to want to extend or even increase the Trump tax cuts, which is going to defund the government, and then justify cuts to things like Medicaid on that basis that the government doesn't have the funds. But, besides the Democrats being in a minority, not those, pretty small, they're not that far from majority in the House or the Senate, but they have a platform. They have a bully pulpit. They can speak up. They can mobilize the people. You know, Bernie Sanders and AOC had 34,000 people in Denver last night. It's the biggest rally Sanders has ever had. They had 15,000 in, I think it was Tucson or Phoenix. And that was bigger than he had when he was running for president. More members of Congress should be, out there. I mean, Sanders and AOC are big draws, but every member of Congress has a platform and they should be using it. And most of them are not. And that's, that's a reason for us to, as Greens, to, do our own mobilizations and, challenge these Democrats to come out with us. And if they don't, that gives us receipts for why we should run against them. Violet at Content Boutique. Hi there, Howie, Chris, and family. Been watching on the Roku screen. Question, is someone from the Green Party going to hold rallies, interviews to showcase our platform? Seems like an opportune time. Well, I think we all know the National Green Party just doesn't have the capacity to do that. We got, 2 staff people. I think they're not even full-time. One runs the website, one answers inquiries. And we're very fragmented. It's in the state parties where we have real organization. The National Party is just a loose federation of state parties. And that's where we can, respond. And I think one person who's doing that well, at least when I see from his fundraising mailings, is Butch Ware, who's running for governor in California. And his messaging so far, everything I've seen has been right on the mark and it's been timely. So he is speaking up. Now, the question is, those of us on his mailing list are getting this message. How much is that getting into the media? And the mainstream media, not yet. He did have a nice interview on with Palestine Chronicle, I believe, which has got some play. The thing is, we're kind of in a chicken and the egg problem. We can't get coverage until we do well, but we can't do well until we get coverage. So, I think what Butch is doing in California is good, and we need more candidates like him out there. One thing about running for office is you have permission to talk to everybody, and you have the right to demand a platform in debates and, community meetings and so forth. So you can begin to put the platform out there. And sometimes you got to fight for that, right to be in those forums. I know when I first ran in Syracuse in the 90s, we couldn't get the time of day from the daily newspaper or the TV stations. But over time, they saw that we were persistent. We had a serious program. And they realized we made good copy for their news or good visuals for their producers. And we started getting covered. So don't be discouraged if at first you don't get coverage. You got to build relationships with the media. And you'll find that, a lot of those reporters, they do want to give you a platform. What's holding them back are their producers or their editors. But, they may write stories that are so good, the producers and the editors, can't ignore them. And so you get coverage and, it builds on itself. So I think the one thing the Greens have that none of the other civic organizations, non-NGOs have, is that we run candidates. And that gives us access, to these forums and also to any voter. I mean, if we're running for office, we can stop a voter anywhere, knock on their door, give them a phone call, and we're not always let in, or people don't always want to talk, but we're not castigated for trying to talk to them in most cases, so that it gives us a way to reach the people. That's one thing campaigns can do. So, but the other thing I'll just say is some Greens say, well, we just got to get people on the ballot, and even if they're not seriously running, that's better than not having them on the ballot. And I say, no. If we don't run serious candidates, the public won't take us seriously. Our candidates should be serious as a heart attack. They should be people who want to win, even if it's a long shot, and have a serious program and are working hard and organizing a campaign organization and local party, not just mobilizing votes. Steve T. Maybe one tactic might be to educate some intelligent celebrities to support and promote Green Party events and platforms. They can generate free publicity. Yeah, good luck with that. We've tried that over the years. I could tell you about all kinds of celebrities in New York City that we've approached. And really the only one that came to us was Al Lewis, Grandpa Al from the Munsters. We got a minor celebrity named Malachi McCourt. We ran him for governor. When we ran Al Lewis in 98, we just got enough votes to get a ballot line for 4 years. When we ran Malachi in 2008, he was the brother of Frank McCourt, who's a better known writer. Malachi, great guy, but not much of a celebrity. So, but I'll tell you, most of the celebrities don't want to be associated with the Green Party because it's controversial for their, public profiles. Of course, the biggest one we ever got was Ralph Nader, who was bigger than we were and did a lot to, put us on the national stage in 1996 when he agreed to stand for office, not run. He didn't raise money, but he let us use his name to get on the ballot, which we did in 23 states. And then 4 years later, in 2000, we got on the ballot in 46 states. And, Ralph, put us on the map in terms of the national media. But he was an exception. I mean, he was committed to the cause. A lot of celebrities, they're committed until it becomes controversial, and then they stay away. So it's hard. I mean, if you can find a celebrity to give us publicity, more power to you. But I'm telling you that's no shortcut. There's no shortcut to building an organization, building grassroots support based on personal relationships between our activists and the public in our communities. That's worth more than celebrity endorsements. Trump and Harris got a lot of celebrity endorsements. I'm not sure they moved many votes. But the publicity thing, you're right. If we can get some of those celebrities, it'll get some attention to us. But then what's more important is what we do with that attention. Viggo Mortensen, Aragorn has been a supporter. Yep, that's true. Although I haven't heard much about him supporting us since 2016, unless I've missed something. But I don't know what we had Cornel West for like 2 weeks. Yeah, Cornel is, I've talked about that. I talked to Cornel at the time, and it's Cornell with one L, by the way, whoever typed that, which Cornell, it matters to Cornell. But Cornell didn't know what he was doing. And I wonder if he didn't get off the Green Party ballot line because he knew he'd actually get on a ballot, and then could be in a position to be in blame for Trump getting elected. So he decided to, run something that wasn't really potentially threatening to the Democrats. I don't know. He said he didn't like all the internal green squabbling, but I mean, come on, Cornell, this is politics. What do you expect? And you expect the nomination without competing for it? I mean, that's what we got from that wrestler. Who am I thinking of? The guy that took the nomination from the Greens in Alaska in 2020. Blanking on his name, but he didn't want to compete for it either. He said the Greens got to give it to him, or he doesn't want Jesse Ventura. Yeah, thanks. That's not democracy. And so yeah, we do have some celebrity endorsements, but I think the more important thing is, our platform speaks for itself, and it speaks to people credibly when we have real organization and serious candidates articulating it and running for office like they want to win. And I know, I just taking my own example, running for governor, I knew I was not going to win, but I was serious and I had serious issues. And we moved the debate. We got a ban on fracking, a $15 minimum wage, paid family leave, got the public schools refunded. And all it took was getting 5% in the 2014 gubernatorial election. And Governor Cuomo had to move on his issues because, he wanted to get those votes back. And he knew he had lost a lot of votes, particularly from teachers and other public sector workers who voted for me, which we could tell because we got a concentration of votes in the Capital District area around Albany, New York. And so that says, even if you don't win the office, you can influence the politics and move the debate. At war with us. Maybe I may have been missed, but I asked, what would finally cause Trump's base to disavow and desert him? What do you foresee as potential last straws? Medicaid, Social Security, veterans benefits, programs that a lot of Trump people depend on, the economy tanking, and then people realizing that, well, it's Trump that did it with his trade wars, tariffs, and, reducing demand because he just cut the public sector. When people are going to feel it personally. And, I think there's not one last straw. It's going to be a number of them. And a lot of them are going to be, people saying, well, I didn't vote for Trump for that. And they're going to get angry. So I expect there be in the midterms, there'll be a backlash against Trump. And that means the Republicans and the Democrats will be back in office, which is going to make Trump a lame duck. But doesn't mean the Democrats going to get anything done either because they'll face Trump's presidential veto. And they don't have a program anyway. They are dependent, controlled by the, super rich donors and the professional middle class, upper middle class operatives who control the Democratic Party. And they don't want redistributive economic programs like Sanders is talking about because that's not who they are. So, the working class is up for grabs. And that's why the left needs to get itself organized and provide an alternative, a serious alternative. And it's got to have to be built from the bottom up, not from the top down through a presidential campaign or some conference with some celebrities. So another hour has passed, and we've, done a lot of bitching and moaning about what Trump is doing and talking a little bit about what we need to do. I hope people, there were demonstrations mentioned tomorrow. It's really important that people get out to those. And even if they're led by, people like Indivisible who want to, rehabilitate the Democratic Party, don't worry about the leadership of those organizations. Worry about the rank and file that show up, like you show up, and get to know some of those people, build relationships. And over time, you have a relationship, trust, you can talk about politics and maybe recruit some of them to your local independent Green Party. So we can be building our own movement and party, even as we participate in these broader united fronts against Trump. So that's what I urge everybody to do, get out there, speak up, even, social media is not enough, but speak up on social media. That helps sets the tone. There are lots of ways to resist, and just not being silent is where to start. So I hope everybody has a good week. I don't have a guest plan for next week, so we may do more question and answers, although there are some people I've asked and who want to come on. We're just looking for the right dates to do it. So with that, we got a lot of work ahead of us. So everybody have a good week, and we'll see you next week.